Good afternoon and welcome. Before I get too deep into this today, I want to take a moment to thank and help me thank the CxEnergy staff and volunteers. So if you see Ray, you see Anna, you see any of the other support staff, tell them thank you if you found this conference as enriching as I have. Is everyone having fun so far? Are we awake? That really does help. Thank you. My name is Woody Thompson. I'm from RS&H, and thank you for joining this session today. We're going to talk about the joy, the life-fulfilling of experiences of doing commissioning for the federal government. But before we get too deep into that today, I want to keep with the Star Wars theme, which seems to be mandatory on this day for whatever reason. If somebody could tell me why, I'd appreciate it. I will guarantee you I will not be as entertaining as episodes 1 through 9. No, I take that back. I will be far more entertaining than episode 1. A civics course on how you too can have a galactic empire. And speaking of galactic empires, does anybody work with the federal government? Show of hands. Outstanding. So you'll know when I'm lying today. That's good. I like to be checked that way. To gauge the room, how many commissioning providers do we have? Owners. No owner. One owner. Thank you, sir. You're going to let everybody else know, right?
I'm the federal government, by the way.
You are. Who are you with, sir? Great place. Been there. Commissary's in an interesting place. Won't be talking about that today. How many contractors do we have here? And that's a shame. Gives some good information. Now here's the real ultimate question about what I'm going to talk about today. Lawyers. Outstanding. Lock the doors so they can't get in. So anyway, as the title says, I'm going to talk a little bit today in our discussion about the commissioning process for federal facilities, and I'm going to illustrate this through a few of case studies of varying expectations, and that's important. Because whether it's a federal client or really a private industry client, there's usually some confusion about who is on the commissioning team. Who is a commissioning stakeholder? Does it stop with just the commissioning agent and their specialists and the contractors? Is the designers part of the commissioning team? Is the owner or the owner's O&M staff part of the commissioning team? And it's interesting how when you present that question, you get various answers, and with those answers come various expectations of the commissioning process. Before I go forward, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself to give you some perspective. I've been in the industry 31 years. I started out in HVAC test and balance way back in the days when you did commissioning for the federal government, especially DOD, they clumped that into the tab scope of work. And then they came to a realization that how can we maintain this non-biased third party if we're trying to verify some of the things that test and balance does, as well as the general contractor and the subcontractors. So through the years, the importance of maintaining a non-biased position of the commissioning providers and specialists has become more and more important, more and more prevalent, thank you. But with the federal government, they've maintained some archaic language through the years. This is not a broad brush of everything in the federal government or the DOD. But the changes in the scope of work and the RFQs for commissioning services have been slowly evolving over the years. So I did test and balance, then I got into design, project management, and currently I am a region leader for facility condition assessments, energy, and commissioning projects, and that's commissioning with a big C, covering existing buildings as well as new construction. So with all that said, this is an AIA course. This material is copyrighted, and the course description is pretty much what I just said. We're going to talk a little bit about the perceptions of what is total building commissioning. And what is the perspectives of the stakeholders, and I'll have some case studies that I'll share with you supporting different views of the process and the expected results. my primary purpose is not to illustrate, or is to illustrate that there are differing levels of agreement about what commissioning is and what it is not. And hopefully in this discussion, I'll illustrate some of the conflicts in these varying expectations. But there are avenues of resolution when, and they will, come up. So with that said, with learning objectives, I want to share some case studies with you so you have a deeper understanding of some of the conflicts that do come up. And these aren't peculiar to federal government projects, not by far. But they do come up, and they have to be resolved so ultimately the owner gets what they paid for. What are the expectations of each stakeholder? And I will definitely illustrate how they are in conflict. There's even a conflict on who a stakeholder is and what's their responsibility. How these expectations go unmet is going to be pretty obvious to you. But there is a way through. There are ways to resolve. And I'm going to illustrate, hopefully, what is obvious to you in proposed solutions. So let's get back to basics. Let's boil it down very, very simply. What are expectations? We all have expectations in life. And that comes up especially when you're an owner, you're a stakeholder, and you're paying money or resources or time for something. Are you getting the best value out of that something? So what is that expectation? It's anticipation. It's looking forward. I am in the federal government building a new facility. Let's say just a generic training facility. Well, I have certain things that I expect the designer of record to illustrate in their plans and specs and design analysis that I expect, because I'm paying for this, a contractor to execute successfully. But I need a guarantee of that anticipated effort. I need that assurance, that guarantee that what I want as an owner is going to happen. Because again, for putting on my federal government hat again, I'm using taxpayer dollars. And if there's anything about any public governmental entity, regardless of the level, you're dealing with the people's money, and the people want to know that you're doing it right. So there's that assurance element that I expect, no, I demand, out of the commissioning process. And from that is an expected value. Did I get what I paid for? Is the results favorable from multiple variables? So, what is my expectation as an owner? Well, our expectation, everyone in the room is an owner, and we want buildings that are high-performing, functional, sustainable, easy to maintain for my O&M staff, efficient, and as the last few years have illustrated, healthy. It's funny, I was talking to somebody earlier today that before COVID, in the area of the late 90s, when we were dealing with mold in facilities, lots of talk about indoor air quality, indoor environmental quality. And then it seemed to fade a little bit as time went by until COVID. And then all of a sudden, it's a big concern again, justifiably so. We should have never lost touch in the first place. So if there's any good that came out of what we've experienced the last few years, is that we're putting more emphasis back in indoor air quality because we spend more time in the facilities that we work out of than where we live. And it's amazing how a building will have prevalent cases of upper respiratory problems because they're not healthy. But of course, we want our buildings to be affordable to build and to maintain. And we want to enhance the reputation of the owner, the AE, and the contractors, anybody's there, so a taxpayer can say, yeah, they spent my money right. And it was justifiable in how they spent it. So what is commissioning? Well, looking at the basic definition coming out of ASHRAE 202, ASHRAE Standard 202, which is important. And I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I do want you to focus on the highlighted terms. This is a quality-focused process. This isn't just something that we're checking some boxes to make everybody happy. Yeah, the lights shut on, the lights shut off. Good. No, that's not what commissioning is. It's quality focus and quality from beginning to end. for when the owner dreams up the project and the owner contributes to their project requirements, little term you may have heard of called the OPR, emphasis on the O, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the designers understand, how do we execute that with a quality focus for the ultimate goal of my second highlighted point, to meet the owner's project requirements. Not the contractors, not the designer of record, not Woody Thompson's, the owners. Now, sometimes they ask for things that can't be achieved, and that's why it's critical that communication and the back and forth, respectful and constructive, has to occur. But if we're doing our job as commissioning providers, regardless of client, it's got to be quality focused, and it's got to be as per what the owner is expecting from their investment. So, what is the commissioning process? And I think through the years, this has been evolving. And I think as commissioning providers, we spend more time educating internally as well as externally what this process is. How many people in the room have been called up after 50% of construction and saying, we're ready to sign your commissioning contract. When can you come out? Yeah, where's your report? Or we're ready for you. Can you be out here tomorrow? Yes, thank you. That's far too late. The commissioning process should happen all the way in the programming phase, the planning phase. The first time that they've dreamt this up on a 1391 and assigned a budget that we're having a project, all right, do we need a commissioning specialist on board? May not necessarily be somebody certified, but somebody that has knowledge. So we can start talking about owner's project requirements at the design charrette phase, not at 50% construction. I can't tell you how many times this year, this fiscal year, well, last fiscal year, that our design team came to me and said, Woody, how quick can your team put together an OPR? I said, okay, when's our OPR workshop with the owner? Oh, the owner wants nothing to do with it. You do know what the O stands for, right? So we, as a group, cannot tell the owner what they want, but we can work with them, and we should encourage them and educate them. So the design team doesn't make the design first and then ask for the OPR. So it's important upon us to educate. So that's what we do in the programming phase. And we continue through the design phase and the construction, obviously. And then the acceptance, and then warranty and post-warranty if the owner is, again, willing to pay for it. But it's not just a bunch of testing at the end. It's not a phone call saying, we've already done startups, can you be out here tomorrow? And by the way, where's your commissioning plan? It doesn't work that way. And I'm quite certain you all have experienced that frustration. So we're going to get into, the case studies here, and then I'm going to start talking a little bit about what the stakeholders feel about this from top to bottom. All three of these case studies I was personally involved with. All of these case studies are not exaggerated. They are the truth. And I don't think anybody related to these cases are in the room, thank goodness. Case study number one is a land port of entry through the Department of Homeland Security. They were the owner, but USACE, the Army Corps of Engineers, was the ultimate management element for Homeland Security. And it was a very small facility, 5,000 square feet. LEED Gold certified. Think about that for a minute. LEED Gold certified. That means this is a perfect project. Functional performance testing was a breeze. Got it done in less than a day. Well, and it wasn't that bad. It was just fundamental commissioning. This was back in the days when LEED didn't make you do enhanced commissioning for their gold certifications. So, expectation is this should be a great project. Woody, why are you bringing this up? Well, as you've probably already read, here's some of the issues. I was not contracted to the owner, even though I wanted to be. I was contracted to the general contractor, who right out of the gate said, you don't talk to anybody but me. You got a problem, you come see me. Scope of work from the government says, I may be contracted to you, but the communication has to be to the government's contracting officer or representative. Well, I don't care what it says. You're talking to me. Okay, fine. So we move forward, behind schedule for functional performance testing out of the gate. How many people have you had projects where they've always been behind schedule and they tell you you're ready for functional testing and they're not? Because they're trying to beat liquidated damages and they're praying that you'll come out in the 11th hour and the 11th minute and say, it's all good, so they're off the hook. No, that's not how this works. And I've made many a contractor mad when I tell them that. I don't care about your delayed schedule. I'm looking at the period of performance that the government has defined. So don't expect me to come in and clean up your mess. What's worse, subcontractors weren't getting paid. GC was behind. So the sub said, we're not participating in functional performance testing, and it wasn't in my contract to participate in functional performance testing. So imagine that. You're trying to get a tab firm to verify tab. You're trying to get a controls firm to verify the BAS, and they're saying, no, it's not our contract, and they're absolutely right. It wasn't in their contract. So it's a little hard to do functional testing when the installing subcontractors won't even walk on the job. And what's worse, and this will happen in another case study here in a minute, they came to me and said, you're the commissioning authority, right? That means you can get us paid. No, that's not what that means. But thank you for asking. And of course, naturally, when we did get eventually to functional performance testing, and being that we're out on the border, the Corps of Engineers had to travel very, very far away to come to this fairly remote site. It failed hard, failed gloriously. And the senior Corps guy pulled me aside and said, what do you want to do? And I said, what I want to do is we'll come back when they're ready. To which, of course, and you should have seen this coming, the GC pulled me aside and said, you'll never work for me again. And I said, of course, good. Because again, the scope of work says my communication goes to the owner's representative, which is not you. And that's the point. When you see scopes of work, you see RFQs and RFPs that say commissioning services shall be provided by general contractor, you just say no, and what's better is you go to the owner and educate them. It's slowly changing, I'll be honest with you. It's not as bad as it was, I'd say, 5 years ago. It's slowly changing, but it's still a long road. And you're still seeing cases of the general contractor subbing out or buying the services of commissioning. So case study number 2 is Child Development Center on an Air Force base. Corps of Engineers was administrating this project. A little larger facility, 18,000 square foot addition to an existing facility. LEED Silver certified, fundamental commissioning. And same problems with contracting, contracted to the general contractor, not to the Corps, behind schedule, as always, that's kind of expected these days. Multiple, and I mean hard fails in functional performance testing due to poor design, especially in controls. And because they didn't bring commissioning in until after design, a lot of the things they could have caught before they dug the hole for the addition. But they didn't bring in commissioning during the design phase, which is critically important. The government, any owner, can save a significant amount of money if you bring commissioning in early. Even if it's halfway through design, bringing them in early. Because you tell me, what's less expensive, changing a line on a screen or ripping out a wall? Fairly obvious. A lot of changes at the owner level and project managers, which is a problem. Whenever you have a change of project managers at any level, it delays the process, because a lot of times, let's go back to square one, or let's take a couple squares back and talk about this project that's had problems. And what adds another layer of complexity is when they change a project manager, especially at the owner level. The designer of record had nothing in their contract for commissioning activities. So when we were trying to resolve some design issues directly related to whether or not commissioning was going to be successful, they looked at the government and said, change order. We don't have to participate in this. And in fact, when I finally got the contract from the designer, I found out, yeah, it actually explicitly stated in the contract that they were absolved of all commissioning participation. Now think about that. The owner is relying on the designer, as I said earlier, to adequately explain to the contractor what he wants, but yet puts in their contract, you don't have to be part of the commissioning process. Education. We need to teach the owners what this process is all about. And unfortunately, it's not a one and done. It's continuous. And that's part of our job. And I enjoy educating, and that's why I'm doing this presentation today. But it's amazing how some of these expectations and perceptions about, am I part of this process? Well, no, I'm not. Commissioning is a contractor issue. I'm the designer, I'm the DOR. I stamped it, seal it, the owner accept it, I'm done. No, you're not. There's still a level of responsibility to make sure that that design is executed successfully. So the acceptance phase, again, not a very large addition, took over a year. And it was just HVAC and lighting controls. Over a year. Most of it was pointing fingers, backbiting, it's your problem, not mine. And meanwhile, we're just sitting on the sidelines saying, let us know when you're done and we can move forward. Case number 3, a light industrial facility for the Army. This time, NAVFAC, Navy Facility Command, was administering the project. This was a 47,000 square foot addition to a rotor blade processing facility. Again, silver certified, this time with enhanced commissioning. And this was about the closest to a total building commissioning job. And I gotta say, NAVFAC was very smart in writing their scope of work and understanding clearly who was responsible for commissioning and going forward. But again, NAVFAC at the beginning said, yeah, we'd like it to be an independent third party. And then when we went to go, when we were told we were awarded the contract, they said, no, we're going to let, the contracting officer said, we're going to let the general contractor handle that because that's what we've always done. Institutional thinking does not make it right. Because we've always done it that way does not make it right. And I fought and lost that argument. But this was a unique facility, and I was intrigued. So we took the contract and we moved forward, as always, behind schedule, concerning functional performance testing. The subs completely walked off the job because of lack of payment. That was interesting, and again solicited me and my team to help them resolve the issue, which I've got no dog in that fight. That's not my problem. But the, oh yeah. The designer of record also didn't get paid, or they weren't thoroughly paid also, so they didn't want to play ball. And this was a design build. So the general contractor held the money of the designer of record, and the designer of record says, I'm not playing ball till you pay me and you pay your subs. And the government's like, I'm sorry. There's a schedule, there's a period of performance. You're about to go into liquidated damages. So as you would expect, the GC is lighting a fire under me saying, get this done, get this done. I just want this equipment accepted. Well, that's interesting because you haven't paid everybody else. You're going to pay me? You know, that's when you start realizing, why am I here? Now, this is the ultimate thing that came out of this. This is an Army facility, Navy's running it, and it was a joint use. It was a joint service use facility, all right? I didn't make that clear earlier. And this is to support my final bullet here. The end user who had a chance to look at the 1391, that had a chance to be part of the design charrettes, decided during functional testing, we want to add more equipment, And Woody, we want your team to commission this additional equipment, even though it wasn't in your original scope of work. It's not in your commissioning plan. You've never seen the design for this, but it's just some minor additional 13 units of HVAC. That's not minor. And you can't swoop in and raise a bunch of noise because you decided to add some things at the last minute, didn't want to talk about change orders, didn't really even let the contracting officer know she was blindsided. And ultimately, it wasn't commissioned, so they raised all kinds of problem, giving the appearance that we didn't do our job. So, I've laid out 3 case studies. I've given you the results. At the end of the day, were any of these projects successfully commissioned? Nobody wants to take a guess? What's that? Yeah, very good, per the scope. After a lot of horse trading, ultimately the government said, we'll accept certain conditions. And they did. It's basically who would blink first, which is frankly, excuse me, a damn shame. It's a damn shame. But a lot of it was because the commissioning process was not thoroughly understood by all the stakeholders. So, yeah, commissioning was complete. Was everybody happy? We passed the functional performance test eventually, after multiple attempts. We verified that the training of the O&M staff was definitely performed. We closed out, to the best of our ability, outstanding issue and resolution log items. There was a lessons learned workshop, which was primarily, I'm never working for a general contractor again. And there was a final deliverable report and a systems manual and contributions to the O&M manual. So after the end of the day and the dust settles, everybody was happy, right? Wrong, nobody was happy. Because the experience was so excruciating, and at that point, that makes an owner think, is there any value to the commissioning process? And sometimes they think commissioning is brought about because LEED said so, which is the biggest lie in the industry. Commissioning was around long before LEED dreamt it up, but still a lot of owners, programmers, will look at LEED and whether or not commissioning is required. Fortunately, I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily true anymore. It was about 5 years ago, but the DoD and NASA especially are realizing, no, this is an independent must-have, whether we're doing green globes or well building or LEED or whatever, the value of commissioning is still important. But again, nobody was happy. Now, why was nobody happy? Contract issues, number 1. Not clear language in the contracts, in the contract documents, plans, specs, design analysis, relating to commissioning. And you would think with all the vetting that happens in these projects, that you would have clear language in our documents. This also led to communication problems, expectations. That's not my job. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Conflicts between the RFP versus the OPR, if it was ever developed, and the specs and basis of design. And it really leads to the air of who's in charge here? Who's defining the requirements for commissioning? And don't point at a UFC. And don't point at a standard. If you don't have it in your contract documents, like the lawyers say, it doesn't exist. And that's what some people are counting on, I hate to say. That ambiguity gives me bullets to use against you. So, is the commissioning process complete? By whose metric? It should be by the owner's metric, but if the owner doesn't establish that completion benchmark, who's to decide? Whoever blinks first? Well, it all boils down to meeting, as a commissioning provider, meeting the expectations, yes, of the owner, of the DOR, of the general contractor, but ultimately the owner. But everybody up and down the food chain needs to be educated. So let's go through some of these expectations. I'm going to start with the owner And all of these levels I'm about to go through, they are all stakeholders, whether they know it or not. And like I gave you an example earlier with the designer of record who didn't have in their contract, it may not be in your contract, but that still does not absolve you of your plans and specs, which are, listen carefully, contract documents. So, when you put on the glasses of commissioning, what are some of these expectations? The left-hand column is what they expect. The right-hand column is some of the realities. Some of these do agree, but for the most part, you can see the ambiguity. I want total building commissioning, and I'm really aging myself here. Who here knows what a Pinto is? Okay. Good. That makes me feel better. Thank you. But an owner wants total building commissioning. But if they don't specify that in their contracts, in their scope of work, it ain't going to happen. And they may want it, but at the end of the day, I can't afford the envelope. I can't afford my security systems. I can only afford HVAC and controls with lighting, even though I want my power systems. I want everything. But as you know, especially in the federal government, there's a finite amount of money to go around. So, I want the commissioning authority to be third-party independent. But you don't specify it. Or what's worse, you'll say, this is what I want, but when push comes to shove, they'll say, okay, general contractor, you have it. And of course, that's not the fox guarding the chicken coop, is it? So owners need to understand the importance of having that third party, non-biased, independent, that holds no allegiances but to the owner. No matter how well you specify what the contract language says or the communication protocol is. But the reason why the government doesn't want to do this is it's one more contract that they've got to administer on a project. Now, some core districts, Albuquerque especially, are writing commissioning services IDIQs. So they always have a pool of providers providing that third-party services, regardless of who the contractor is or the designers. I'd like to see more in NAFAC and in Army Corps going to that concept of a commissioning services only IDIQ. But they're adverse to it. So there's lead commissioning, lead has limitations to commissioning, and they think, I'm not going to do commissioning because this isn't a lead project, has nothing to do with it. They want the full commissioning process, but it's not specified in their RFPs or their scope of work. And they want full participation. They're expecting everybody up and down the food chain, the DOR, GC, and all the subs, including O&M staff and ultimate user staff to be involved with this. And that's hit and miss on the user side. Because a lot of times the user says, oh, I'm getting this great building. And all these things are going to get checked out until they realize they're not. And they go talk to the contracting officer, and contracting officer says, that's not what you agreed upon when this was planned, and we developed the 1391 in the programming budget. So right off the bat, the user already knows, I'm not getting what I paid for. And they get upset. So the DOR expectations, of course they want to make the owner happy, that's how you get future work. But there's an inadequate or no OPR. So when you look at their design analysis for OPR language, the designer's like, if I got a commissioning guy in the office, I'm going to ask him, can they put it together? Or I'm just going to ignore it. Or I'm going to borrow an ASHRAE guide from somewhere and take some language out of there and call it the OPR. Wrong. The O is owner. Now, the owner is going to flat out tell you, I don't know, but you help them along. That builds that relationship from the beginning. So at the end, when it gets to the contractor level, there's no ambiguity. The commissioning helps with the QC, but it's not a replacement for their QC. We can supplement their QC, and we can supplement their CA, but we don't replace it. I've had that rug pulled out from me. Oh, we got a commissioning agent on this looking at my design. That means I'm absolved of all liability once you say yes. Wrong. We will supplement, we will help. And I try to get with the designers a collaborative relationship as well with the owner. General contractor's expectation that commissioning is cheap. Get in, get out, check some boxes, give me a report that says everything is rosy, we're done. Well, that's what they want, but they got to do the work. They got to prove it. And that's why we're working with the general contractor and their subs as you're developing the commissioning plan, as you're developing the systems readiness checklists and the functional performance scripts is critically important. Again, foster collaboration. One of the biggest perceptions, I think, of commissioning when you're on site or in this process is that you're hatchet people. We're out there to play gotcha. No. We need to present ourselves as as the government says, we're here to help, but unlike the government, we mean it. You know? And it's from there that we'll smoke out some issues that are cheaper to resolve when it's on a computer screen than when we've already dug the hole or we're starting to dig the hole. So we can't convince the owner to accept the systems. The only element in all this play that can help accept systems are the people that installed it and programmed it and controlled it in the first place. And don't off the bat get into a combative relationship because that just drags out the process and nobody wins, especially the owner. And if the owner's not happy, we'll never work for them again. Again, open communication. Now, communication flows as a commissioning provider to the client, and how they disseminate it through their protocols is frankly their business. But we're not going to play the, ooh, I need to filter this language because I know I'm in trouble. Work with me, Woody. Well, tell me what your recovery plan is. I'll talk to you about it, but don't tell me what I can and cannot tell the client or the owner, whether it's my client or not. And the, oh, did I go backwards? I'm sorry. Subcontractors, they want to get paid and get out. And the worst way to get the worst performance out of a subcontractor, that really is the success element of this whole conversation, is don't pay them. Because they're living job to job. You don't pay them, they'll take their resources and go to a job site that is paying. And they don't care if it's a federal project, a city project, a private owner, they don't care. You don't pay them, they walk. And I know that because I was a third-tier subcontractor for 11 years. We lived job to job. And the worst thing that you can do in a subcontract is have commissioning not explicitly laid out in their contract language. If it's not there, they're not going to do it. And if you want them to do it, you better be prepared to pay that change order. And the owner will sit there and go, Mr. General Contractor, sorry, this was your successful bid. You're not getting any more in your pot of money unless you can tell me why, other than, oops, we forgot to put that in the subs language. But I'll tell you something, as a commissioning provider, you get in good with the mechanical, the electrical, the controls contractor, the job superintendent, you get in good with those people, magic will happen in front of you. Again, we're here to help. We're not here to point the finger, even though sometimes that's necessary. So the end user's expectation, this isn't necessarily the owner. These are the people that have got to live in here and maintain it. They want input to the commissioning scope of work. They want a voice at the table because at the end of the day, they got to live here and they've got to maintain it. I can't tell you how many times after I've sat through a training session and I have somebody walk up and say, Woody, why did we commission this? That's what cost me the most money in work orders. Why didn't we commission it? Talk to the ultimate owner. I wish they would have commissioned it too. And we brought it up during the design charrette. But again, there's a finite amount of money, and if people aren't being heard, then things will get missed. And that's why always in a commissioning project, federal commissioning projects, during the design charrette is saying, hey, end user input to the OPR. That's vitally important. The answer may ultimately be no, we're not going to do that. We can't afford to commission the envelope, but we can afford pressurization testing, which frankly is mandatory anyway. So, but at the end of the day, it's respect. The end user wants to know at least they contributed, even if the answer is no. Because they're counting on lower O&M costs. I was having a conversation earlier today that, civil engineering squadrons for the Air Force, they got less and less people in their shops. And they've got less and less revenue to subcontract anything. But yet, the expectation and the demand to maintain base facilities is still there. So they want O&M staff that's got good training materials, even if there is a high turnover. Insert video all your training here. That's invaluable for long-term programs. But they know if they have fewer fires to put out, then they can get their mission done. And at the end of the day, they feel like they matter. O&M staff, facility engineers, and users want the confidence that they can carry out their mission and that they're in a good facility to do that. And what does the commissioning authority want? What do we as a collective want? We want, like I said in the list earlier today, we want those better performing buildings that are sustainable, that are healthy. We want to get our work directly for the owner, so there isn't this impression that the fox is guarding the chicken coop, and that all the stakeholders are active, know who they are, from the owner, from the DOR, from the contractors, down to facility staff. We want everybody to feel like, I am proud I was part of this project. And a successfully commissioned project will get us there. And that's when the owner says, you know something? We liked that company out of Mobile, or we liked that company out of Sacramento. I want them on my project again. Now, procurement in the federal government, as you very well know, isn't exactly that easy. But you're remembered more for the good work you've done, but you're remembered far more for the bad work you've done. And it's funny how that follows you through source selection. It's very, very hard to erase that black mark next to your company's name, even in the federal government. So, with all that said, what are some of the common themes that I've brought up? Basically, the first one, I could erase all the rest of them, but the first one, poorly written RFPs, RFQs, scopes of work, specs, design analysis, anything that's put on paper related to commissioning that the owner's paid for, if there's any ambiguity in there, you will not have a happy ending. And that's just the way that is. So there are delays, there are money wasted, there's perception that quality is not brought to commissioning, and anytime the industry thinks that we're not bringing a good quality product, we're out of a job, ladies and gentlemen. So it's really up to us to continue to educate, to keep fighting the fight, to get ambiguity out of this system. Or for somebody to press the easy button and say, I'll just take the language out of lead. That's all I need. Wrong. So, anything poorly written, anything that brings ambiguity is a cancer to the process. So what have we learned here? Everyone's a stakeholder. Everyone has value. Everyone is contributing to this. Mandatory, clear language and everything. And force the OPR. Force the OPR. Even if the owner says, I don't know what you want. Take them by the hand. Sit them down. Because then the designers know what to do. Do not get to 100% design, ready to go to RTA to get this under contract, and somebody says, gee, Woody, how quick can you put an OPR together? Because that's not how it works. That's actually reverse to the process. So you're already setting up roadblocks and setting up benchmarks for failure, which is not what we're here to do. I'll repeat it 1,000 times. Ambiguity is the enemy. Let's get rid of it. We can do that. We have that power. Top-down instruction and communication, even when it's difficult, even when it's awkward. The top's got to know what's going on so appropriate measures can be carried out. Again, I want to emphasize, we don't want to be in the gotcha mode. We're not hatchet people, but we got to help all the stakeholders walk down the same path with the same goal in mind. But at the end of the day, the owner's interest is paramount. And I will reiterate that. Not the designer, not the general contractor, not Woody Thompson. The owner's interest is paramount. And once the owner feels like their interests are being ignored, it's misery from there out. So, at the end of the day, what are the benefits? Higher quality product that leads to better owner, AE, and contractor reputations. That is the easiest marketing dollar to make. So when you do good work, you get good continued work. And that's tried and true for the 31 years I've been in the industry. You get a confident O&M staff that can maintain that facility. You get budget savings in capital and operations. And what's even more important today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, good, healthy buildings for the people that have got to work and basically live in there. We don't have a higher case of upper respiratory problems because of our buildings, of all things. And at the end of the day, less conflicts, which brings into the big L word, lawyers. Because lawyers don't do anything but swoop down, take a bunch of money, and yet the building still has problems. So I know it's necessary in some cases, but it's last resort. And like I've said a few times today, and I'm going to end it with this, at the end of the day, when we go home, we want to make sure that the owner got what they paid for. That's how we as commissioning providers, specialists, agents, authorities, know we did our job, when the owner is happy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm Woody Thompson, I'm with RS&H, and I am open to any questions you may have.
I have a question. How many people do you have employed for you as a commissioning authority?
I had to sit and think about it because we have people that do envelope, we have people that do electrical. So we do full service total building. So our company is 1,500 strong, and I've got 27 people that are certified. And I've got an additional 10 or so, 12 with experience.
So you feel it would be costly almost as an architect fee?
You take a...
Consider you have all these experts, it will cost more than the design team.
It depends on what they want commissioned, but you brought up the example of an architect. I'm not going to bring a 30-year experienced architect to do a job, but you get somebody that's in that 5 to 10 year range that understands enough about infiltration, that understands enough about types of roof and roof enclosures. Absolutely, I'm going to give them some building commissioning work. Now, if there's some complex issues, I will call a senior level person to consult.
Getting involved in this, you're going to solve this, you're going to solve this. No one in the United States will afford you if you cost more than the design team.
Then why do I still have a job?
I have no idea. That's a good question. That was my third question.
Yes, rates.
I want to work for them too.
We're an architectural engineering company, so we have a lot of resources and specialized from licensed architects, registered engineers, to which I am. I'm a professional engineer. But I also have technician level that have been in the industry as technicians for 15, 20 years, who don't have as high of a labor rate.
If I'm a design engineer and you send me technicians, that's it. I will not listen to you.
I disagree.
If you agree, so in order for me to listen to you on the same level, I have to.
Oh, okay. Are you talking about when you're consulting with designs and design reviews?
No,
absolutely. I have peers. I have peers that deal with a PE talking to a PE. Yeah, that at that level, absolutely right. Yeah.
You can have a staff full of those professionals and cost nothing.
I didn't say that.
You're going to cost very huge amount of money that will come to the same as an architect cost.
So,
which brings to kind of like a all these people can afford to work for those kind of people that you work for?
I'm still in business.
Yes, sir.
If he thinks he can't afford us, I do hospitals and data centers. What does it cost for every minute that a hospital or data center goes down? You can afford us.
I think, yeah, and just, I guess just for clarity, I think what he's referring to is that they have senior level leads, project managers, group leaders, and lead technicians, senior lead technicians, engineers, whatever they're called, in the field, executing, doing document review, and all that. And they have technicians supporting them executing and doing documents.
Still big organizations, they cost a lot of money.
Well, and I think maybe to his point, the way the federal RFPs are written for design build, they are often, yeah, they're, you know, best value, but really low cost, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day,
Yeah.
he has a point. The structure of the contracting in the DoD puts price pressure on commissioning services.
Especially in design build.
Yes, especially in design build.
And
So,
we don't-
and that's just the way that structure works. So
And as
you
a-
can have your stance that that's not the right way to do it. And I think most of us as commissioning agents would agree, we would like to work for the owner. But that's not the structure of federal design build contracting. So
And thank you.
some of us work in that world and we have to figure out how to do that.
And thank you for bringing that up, because all the examples I brought up today were design build. And it was from those lessons learned that we intentionally don't do design build. Because who runs design build at the end of the day? It's the GC, and they're going for the lowest value. It's the lowest value that they've got. So how can we wedge commissioning out of the design build contract? And that's going to the government and ask them, can you do an owner procured for commissioning services, like the example I brought up? That's glacially slow right now. But design build is structured for commissioning not to work, in my opinion, because you're going to get very low cost. And frankly, if it's low cost, I question the experience that goes with it.
Well, yes, this is related to that, actually. So,
In the federal process, we have the D3091, TOD, and the OPR is called out as a deliverable. What have you done different that will help you have an OPR that better serves the project?
Keep asking the questions. If the owner, when the design charrette is there and the agenda doesn't talk about commissioning, I start asking a lot of questions why, and reaching out through our own project manager of that design to the contracting officer to say, hey, you're missing a very vital element that's actually required by the UFC.
Yeah, but it doesn't call it as a deliverable, so you've done something different that has helped you develop the OPR, and I wanted to know how you're doing that.
I don't know if I understand your question. How have we developed OPRs without the owner's input?
The OPR is not a deliverable in their process. It's not called out as a deliverable because they have different other names for it. So
Yes.
what have you done different to make sure that you get a good OPR?
I go back to my original answer is asking, well, first of all, if commissioning is there, OPR is a deliverable, even if it isn't explicitly stated. Once you state that you need to follow commissioning as per, ASHRAE Standard 202 or UFC 1-202, you got to have that in there. But it can be glossed over, and again, it's being that nuisance, asking the question, why?
But did somebody give you the OPR?
Oh, we've had to piece it together from information that's known.
Okay, so you put it all.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if they want nothing to do with it, we're left to put the pieces together and do the best we can. Okay, no, thank you.
Deliverables that you put it. Thank you.
Isn't that wrong if you're writing the OPR?
Well, it absolutely is, but the owner says, I don't see the OPR, and we go back and we say, but you're the owner, we would love to sit down and talk to you about it, and they're like, no, just develop it and send it to me, or put it in the DA. That's very wrong. It is very wrong. That's a big problem in the industry. Yes, sir, the one behind you.
appreciate it. So, in every one of these examples, I believe everyone, there was an issue with subs getting paid and et cetera. But also, you are doing lots of retesting.
Yeah.
Are you getting paid for that retesting and how if they're not even paying themselves?
With a lot of threats and cajoling. Yeah, yeah, in fact, we write it into our proposal that after the first fail, any additional retest costs so many dollars per hour. And we put that right in our contract language that they've signed and executed. Now, getting them to pay, that's a totally different story. That's exactly right. In design build. And I'll be honest with you, I hate design build. I'll never do design build again. Yes, sir, you had a question?
I mean, I think you gotta probably add, when you're talking about this OPR discussion, that RS&H is likely the designer of record as well. Where a lot of firms in this room might be commissioning agents, so writing an OPR, if you aren't the designer of record, if you aren't the architect and the engineer, in other words, makes a difference. Now, your firm's probably the lead designer on this project, so you're coming from a little bit different.
Not all the time. In fact, a lot of times the government will not let us commission our own designs. It's very rare that they'll allow that to happen. So whenever I hear of a possible project, and this is my strategy, no big secret here, we didn't win the design. Okay, who did? Burns and Mac. I knock on their door. Hey, Burns and Mac, I know for a fact the government's not going to let you commission it, even though you could. Think about us. And then we develop those relationships. But what's interesting in that relationship is then you start developing these joint ventures down the road, because I can make you be the commissioning for my projects if you let me be the commissioning for your projects. So it's all a dance. Yeah, I know. It's all a dance. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I've totally ignored this side of the room. Is there any? Yes, please.
So I've been doing commissioning now probably for 12 years.
Yes.
But I found out the best way that works to get an OPR is what we have is like a 3-page questionnaire. And I usually send that out to the owners and architects. They fill it out with yes, no questions or just straight statements. And they send it back to me, and then I just formulate the OPR from there. But that seems to be the best way to do it. Just have like a questionnaire, a 3-page questionnaire with all the questions you can ever think of, divided into different sections, and then...
You're absolutely right. I'm only going to push back a little bit on this. The designers love it. Especially if they know you, they'll fill out that questionnaire. They'll give you all the information that you want. The owner, it goes into that filing cabinet to infinity.
Well, what I actually require the OPR to be signed by the owner. Or the rep. Yeah, so I have on the bottom of the questionnaire, after this questionnaire is being filled out, the owner has to review and sign it, and actually have their letterhead put on the OPR, on that questionnaire, and respond back to me.
And
9 times out of 10, I get it back.
They do that because I'm curious about what do you do with the ones that ignore you?
Well, those are the ones where the architect kind of takes the lead, and usually the architect pushes, hey, owner, even if they don't even read it, they sign it.
They just sign it anyway to make you go away. All right, we got time for one more question. Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.